continuing through the GI tract, we're moving into the stomach. So that bolus has made it into the stomach. Once the bolus has made it into the stomach, we're going to start referring to it as chyme. Now let's do a quick recap of the gross anatomy, looking at the abdominal regions first before we look at the stomach itself. So remember, in our abdomen, when we're looking here, we are going to have different regions that you see that are going to be placed here, showing you the different divisions of where the different structures are going to be. The ribs on either side are going to indicate where our hypochondriac regions are going to be. So you're going to have your right and your left. And this is going to be the area that's going to be under hypochondry, which is going to be your cartilage. So we're talking about the cartilage of your ribs. So we have the right side, we have the left side. And then what we're looking at here in between the two is the epigastric region. Gastric meaning stomach, and then epi meaning over or above. We're going to be focusing on the stomach, which is going to be in this area right here with the epigastric region. Now, in terms of labeling, I want you to be able to label all the structures that are going to be located on the gross anatomy of the stomach. Now, like most of our viscera, you're going to have some common names for these structures, so you need to make sure you're referring to the correct organ when you're talking about it. So for instance, here, the top rounded portion of your stomach is referred to as the fundus. Other organs are also going to have a fundus. They're going to have a body as well. So notice those structures and make sure you're applying it to the correct organs when we're talking about it. We can see the esophagus coming in here, and then if you were to take a dissection and look into the stomach, it's going to look very wrinkly inside of it. That wrinkly structure is going to be referred to as rugae. The rugae are going to be these folds. The folds are going to allow for the expansion of the stomach. When you put food into the stomach, it's going to cause the volume inside to increase. And as you do that, you're going to smooth out the rugae. So the rugae allow you to have that ability to extend or distend your stomach, and then it's going to look more smooth on the inside when it's going to be full. But when your stomach is empty, you're going to see a lot of the rugae in there. One of the distinctive things you have in the stomach is going to be 3 muscular layers. We talked about we had circular and longitudinal layers. In the digestive tract, you still have that. So you have your longitudinal layers, you're going to have your circular layer that's going to be here as well, but we're also going to have an oblique layer. That oblique layer that is shown right in here is going to allow us more motility than we have and more ability to move and turn things around within the stomach itself as opposed to other sections of the digestive tract. So the function of the stomach is going to be temporary storage of ingested foods. And we're going to start with our mechanical digestion because we're going to do lots of mechanical muscular contractions that are going to allow us to mix and churn all that chyme with all this digestive juice. So we're going to be producing digestive juice, which is going to have all these secretions made by your stomach cells that are going to be added to that bolus, and then you're going to be mixing and churning to really get that all mixed up so you can start doing digestion with it. We're going to digest a little bit chemically with our acids and our enzymes from our stomach, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Do notice the shape in the gross anatomy. It's kind of like a J shape in here. You're going to have a lesser curvature, and then on the outside over here, you're going to have a greater curvature that's creating that J shape that we have. The cardia section is going to be the junction with the esophagus. You're going to have lots of mucus glands that are going to be located in there. The fundus, of course, I mentioned earlier, is going to be superior to that, so it goes above a little bit where that esophagus is going to come in. And of course, the body is that large region that's going to be that central part. The bottom portion down here, we're going to pay particular attention to. This is our pylorus. The pylorus is going to have different sections to it, but is the last part of the stomach where you're going to be connecting to where the small intestine is going to be. We want to keep food within your stomach for a period of time. We don't want it to automatically pass from the esophagus and just go down into the small intestine. We want to slowly release contents from the stomach into the small intestine to allow the small intestine to have time to digest it, small bits at a time, as well as to allow the mixing and churning with the gastric juices of our stomach. So you will have a sphincter muscle that's going to be in here as well. So that's our pyloric sphincter that's going to close so we can keep the chyme in here. It will open up and release a little bit of chyme at a time to allow some to go into the duodenum of the small intestine.
So let's look at the histology of the stomach itself. When we looked at the digestive tract, we had the mucosa, submucosa, muscular layer, and then the serosa. Those main layers are going to be the same, but there are going to be some structures within those layers that we're going to have to look at that's going to be a little bit different. So of course, the space that we have inside the stomach we refer to as the lumen. That's where the bolus is going to come in, and that's where we're going to deposit all of our gastric juice. We'll talk about the gastric juice in a little bit. That first layer, though, is the mucosa layer. The mucosa layer is forming that lumen for that open space. Now remember, our mucosa is oftentimes going to have rugae, which are going to be those folds that allow the stomach to distend. On that mucosa itself, you are going to have a mucous epithelial lining, and then you can see underneath it that's the lamina propria, which is going to be connective tissue. A distinctive feature we have in the mucosa, though, is a gastric pit. Now remember, every time you see gastric just means referring to the stomach. So this is an opening where you're going to have the gastric glands below it that are going to dump the gastric juice into here, which will then go and collect within the lumen of the stomach. Underneath your mucosa, you have your submucosa layer. So you can see your submucosa layer that's going to have lymphatic vessels, blood vessels, arteries and veins that are running through there. Those arteries and veins branch up to create the capillary beds we have within our mucosa, as well as going to contain the lacteals, which are going to come up as well for part of the lymphatic vessels. Underneath the submucosa layer, you're going to have your muscular layer. The distinctive thing we have in the stomach, as opposed to the rest of the digestive tract, are going to be 3 distinctive muscular layers. So you will have muscles running in a directional that's going to be diagonal, so that's oblique. Then you'll have your circular muscular layer going around, and then you're going to have your longitudinal muscle layer. So all 3 of those layers are going to be working in conjunction with each other so that they are able to coordinate the churning and the mixing that you get of the chyme that's going to be within the stomach. Do notice you have these plexuses. Again, you're going to need plexuses in order to coordinate all that muscle contraction. And then, of course, the outer lining is going to be the serosa. So the serosa is the outermost lining. It's running continuous with the mesentery. Here you can see the greater mesentery that's going to be draping from the stomach all the way down in front of the abdomen. Now what we're doing is we're looking really closely at one of those gastric pits. So like right in this section here. We can see the gastric pit, which is going to be formed by that epithelial layer, and then going downward, you're going to have these gastric glands. So the gastric glands are going to be comprised of these 3 different cells that are secreting different items that become part of our gastric juice. Now, when we look at these different glands, we're going to have the parietal cells, the G cells, and the chief cells. Now, each of these gastric glands is going to secrete what's going to end up being about 1.5 liters of gastric juice per day, which is going to get dumped into the lumen, mixed in with your chyme, and getting churned and moved around. So the parietal cells, they are going to be secreting intrinsic factor. Intrinsic factor is a glycoprotein, and it helps you absorb B12 later on in the small intestine when you're able to do those absorptions. It's also going to indirectly secrete hydrochloric acid. So it's going to secrete hydrogen ions and chloride ions, which we will then use to create the HCl. We'll talk about that in a second. The G cell down here is going to secrete the hormone gastrin. That hormone gastrin is going to cause the parietal cells and chief cells to secrete their gastric juices. So this is a stimulating cell that secretes a hormone that causes more secretion to happen. And lastly, we have the chief cells. The chief cells are going to secrete enzymes that are going to help with protein digestion. They're going to secrete the inactive form of the protein, though. The chief cell secretes pepsinogen. Pepsinogen is going to be released into the gastric pit and then into the lumen. And then when that comes in contact with hydrochloric acid, the hydrochloric acid is going to activate it to pepsin, and pepsin is going to help to digest proteins. So protein digestion is going to begin within the stomach because of the hydrochloric acid and the pepsin that's going to be created from our chief cells. Let's look specifically at what's happening within the parietal cell that's going to allow us to create that acidic environment within the stomach. The stomach is going to contain gastric juice, and that gastric juice mixing with the chyme is going to have a pH of about 2 or 3, which is highly acidic. That's going to help us to break down the proteins within our food and then break down the components into smaller components that can go into the small intestine for further digestion. But to make that hydrochloric acid, the parietal cell is going to take carbon dioxide, which is a natural byproduct of cellular respiration, and water, and going to combine it into this carbonic acid. The carbonic acid is going to almost automatically dissociate, and when it dissociates, it's going to release free hydrogen ions and then a bicarbonate ion. The hydrogen ions get transported out into the lumen of the stomach. So this is the gastric gland lumen, and then that will go into the lumen of the stomach. That bicarbonate ion is going to get transported out into the interstitial fluid surrounding the other parietal and chief cells and G cells that are going to be around it. That bicarbonate ion is going to create an alkaline basic environment that we're going to use for other things, and we'll talk about that in a second. At the same time that you're transporting the bicarbonate out, chloride is going to be transported in. So as the chloride is getting transported into the parietal cell will keep shunting it across until it goes across into the lumen of the gastric gland. So now all of a sudden we have hydrogen ions and chloride ions hanging out in the gastric gland, and they are going to combine and they're going to create the hydrochloric acid. That hydrochloric acid, of course, is going to be released into the lumen of the stomach itself to create that gastric juice. So the hydrochloric acid is getting mixed in there, the gastrin from the G cell, and then that pepsinogen, and then the pepsinogen gets activated when it comes in contact with the hydrochloric acid to create the pepsin. Now you might be wondering, if we're releasing all that hydrochloric acid, how is it not eating away at the tissues that are making up the stomach itself? Well, part of that is if you look down here within the gastric pit, you'll see that you're also going to have mucus cells. So mucus cells are going to be creating a thick mucus layer, so that mucus layer is going to be providing a nice physical barrier between the acidic gastric juice and those epithelial cells. At the same time, we're also, remember, secreting this bicarbonate ion. That bicarbonate ion is going to create this neutralization zone. So all of these cells that we have are releasing that bicarbonate into the interstitial fluid in this area, and that's going to cause a very neutral pH in this particular layer. So you will have a mucus layer on top of the lining. The lining itself is going to be neutralized by the bicarbonate that's going to be bathing that fluid. Plus, you're going to have tight junctions between these cells. Those tight junctions are going to act as superglue so that you're not going to have fluid that's leaking between the cells. So the vulnerable tissue on the inside is not going to have any of the gastric juice coming in contact with it, because first you have that mucus layer, then you have a neutral zone from that bicarbonate mixture in the interstitial fluid, and then you have these tight junctions so that none of that gastric juice is able to go between the cells to get into the tissue around it. Your stomach lining is also going to have rapid cell regeneration. The stomach lining itself is replaced every 3 to 6 days. So when cells do get damaged, you're already automatically creating new ones. Another key component is that you're going to be creating prostaglandins. Prostaglandins help to maintain this wall. They're going to stimulate more mucus and bicarbonate release, and they're going to maintain blood flow to this area to help with cellular repair. So that also helps to suppress excessive acid secretion. So the prostaglandins are all helping with all of this. Now, if someone is taking NSAIDs, that's non-steroid anti-inflammatory drugs like ibuprofen or Aleve, all of those block prostaglandin production. So some people who take those in a long-term sort of treatment are going to find that they have a higher risk of ulcers and acid reflux, because without those prostaglandins there to monitor that situation and maintain that nice neutral environment, it's a lot easier to have the hydrochloric acid that's going to be doing damage or getting produced at excessive rates without prostaglandins because of the NSAIDs.